quiet before the cry, where the heartbeat learns to fly. She saw the stories left untold, in womb and wave and young and old. She traced the birth of memory's thread, where science feared she gently led. With every class and journal line, she gave new voice to the divine. Oh, the first 9 months they hold the key to who we are, to who we'll be. And Jeane, she showed the world anew that life begins with all we do. She taught with fire and taught with grace, in every school and every place, from foster halls to scholar's pen. She held the truth of where we begin. Her study saw what eyes could miss, the body's tell that birth's first kiss. She named the silence, shaped the field, with love, with data, and with yield. Oh, the first 9 months they hold the key to who we are, to who we'll be. And Jeane, she showed the world anew that life begins with all we own. She walked with children lost in pain, and wrote their hope in novels' name. She added, she stood her ground, so truth once hidden might be found. Now in her words, her quiet fire, lives the call to reach much higher. For peace begins before the light, and Jeane's truth the world finds sight.
Hello, dear Jeane, and welcome to this series of the days and works of pioneers in the field of prenatal sciences.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Jeane, let's take the things from the beginning.
Okay.
Going back some years, before even you were conceived, what was the chrono-space cultural environment in which you were conceived? Where was it in terms of geography?
Okay, it was in a rural area near St. Louis, Missouri. And it was in the years just as World War I was starting, or excuse me, World War II. I'm making myself much older than I am now. But we were on a farm At that point, before I was conceived, my parents were renting a farm and later purchased the farm that my grandparents had farmed and were on that place for the 40 years.
Right. And can you give us a little bit of the energy of those times, the values that were present, or even, the specific whatever during this Second World War, before that, or around that?
Okay, well, for us in the rural area, our primary social contacts were relatives. Family was very important. My both parents were close to their families, and I had lots of cousins. Um, so we didn't really see a lot of other people other than, close relatives.
Mhm.
And the values were very Christian. Both my parents had grown up in Christian churches, different ones, and we wound up attending what was then the Evangelical and Reformed Church. A lot of my ancestors came from Germany and helped establish that church in Troy, Missouri. Troy is the name of the little town that we were closest to. And it was very fundamental. Like I said, very family oriented. And the values were, I would say, rather strict, rather strictly enforced. This is the way we need to live our life.
Okay, so I understood well when I understood that there was some migration pattern in the ancestral field,
Mhm.
right, from Germany.
Uh, well, I always thought that I was primarily German because that's the history that had been told. What I found out through Ancestry, and I've done a lot of research because I've now written 2 books for family, tracing my maternal ancestry and maternal ancestry. And on the paternal side, it's primarily British Isles.
Ah,
And they kind of migrated. My great grandfather on that side, his family moved from Sweden to Switzerland. And I always knew he had immigrated from Switzerland, or excuse me, from Germany. He went from Switzerland then to Germany, and he had immigrated from Germany. But and the family story was he was a hideaway on a ship, and he hid in a pickle barrel get to the U.S. I haven't been able to confirm that, but I have not been able to find him on any ship registries. So I think he probably was a hideaway. Stowaway, I guess they call it on a ship.
and do you happen to know what was the motivation why they came from UK, Ireland, Switzerland here to the US?
No, I don't have that history. I only learned that through my brother who had talked to my dad about it.
No.
And he didn't have any details. They did do that migration.
Okay, so let's go to your family figures, your father and your mother. What are the names, first of all?
My dad's name was Eddie B, and that's his given name, Eddie, Eddie, and the initial B. And my mother called him B.
B. Okay, good.
But everybody else called him Eddie B.
Okay,
And my mother was Irene.
Irene. Oh, good.
Her given name was Helena Irene. And she chose to use the middle name because both her mother and grandmother were named Helena.
Uh-huh. Good. And what do you think, or what have you received as the best qualities of your mom?
Well, From my mother, I would say a great deal of patience
Peace.
and acceptance. She
Mm.
was what I've heard referred to as a very good woman. She was a farm wife. She cooked and gardened and took care of the farm animals. And my dad was a farmer. And she assisted him, as did all of us kids as we got old enough.
Mm. So patient and kind and good-hearted
Mhm.
and nurturing. How did you um, think? How do you think you um, gave value to these qualities you received from your mom?
From my mom, because she always helped us with our homework. She was a teacher in rural schools before she married and had 2 years of college. My dad graduated from elementary school and never went to high school.
Mm.
But mom, she was very modest about that. I didn't realize the difference in education until I was a little bit older. But I think the fact that that nurturing, that helping with the education instilled in me how important she thought it was.
Mm. How many children were in the family apart
Okay,
from you?
at the time I was born, I had one older sister who's 2.5 years older. Then I had three younger brothers, and much later, a younger sister. So there were six total.
Quite a good size family. Right, excellent. So, mother had this teaching or conveying something beautiful to somebody else element and the kindness. Have you met and lived with your maternal grandparents?
Yes. My maternal grandparents lived in let's see, I think they were both in their mid 70s, I think, which for the time was a good lifespan. They died within 8 months of each other.
Mm.
My grandfather first, and then a bit later, my grandmother. And
What,
yeah, they
what
were very kind people. My grandmother was very social. She belonged to a lot of, the ladies' aid at church and uh, was very active in that way. My grandfather was a farmer,
Mhm.
and but he was a rather educated farmer for the time. He had some college, and my grandmother was also a teacher in rural schools and
Ah,
did teacher education at Kirksville State Teachers College in Missouri.
right. So teaching runs in the family.
It does. Actually, it's followed through because I was teaching in community colleges after I completed my degrees. My son was a elementary teacher. My granddaughter is a middle school teacher.
Right.
So we've kept up the tradition.
Yeah. And I think that you have moved a little bit further by teaching
Mhm.
not just the skills and knowledge, but also the wisdom that goes about life itself, apart from whatever else. Or am I wrong?
Yes. And the contrast then between the two families. I mean, I grew up, you think that everybody lives the same way when you're very young. Uh, so we had a family with the five children until my youngest sister came along, and my grandparents on both sides had five children. So I just thought all families were kind of composed the same.
Hmm. So you say that there were similarities, kind of similarities between the maternal grandparents and the paternal grandparents or families.
Yeah, that was similar, but the paternal grandparents were less educated.
Mhm.
Uh, I think my grandfather went to third grade elementary school, and that was it. I'm not sure about my grandmother, but I know she never went to high school. And they were much more fundamental. They were Christian, a rural Christian church, whereas, as I mentioned before, my maternal grandparents were the evangelical and reformed, a little more quiet in their way of celebrating religion.
Right. And do you happen to have any stories to share from your maternal grandparents?
Maternal grandparents. Well, I've mentioned how social my grandmother was. Grandpa was more quiet. He would sit back, but he always had kind of a gentle smile and, was more reserved. Good story. When my mother was just getting ready to head off to college, she'd gone down to enroll. That day, their house burned. And so they lost everything in that home fire. And in researching for the book, I found stories about when the house burned and how the neighbors came in and helped them rebuild. And so you had that tight community thing.
Community spirit, yeah. And what about any stories from the paternal grandparents?
Grandfather. Well, he lived a little longer than my grandmother. She was diabetic and died in her early 60s. And then my grandfather lived a while longer, and he was 15 years older than she was. So he was in his mid to late 70s and had cancer. And during that time, he lived by himself in a little house outside of town. And we could see there was a radio tower with flashing lights on it near his house. And from our farm, we could see that light. And we always called it Grandpa's light.
Right. So let's go back to B, your father. What kind of person was he, or how you remember him as a human being?
Well, he was very gregarious. He enjoyed getting together with the other farmers. He always liked it when people just stopped by. In his opinion, you didn't have to call to say you were coming by, and that you should just surprise people, which he did himself. He was kind of a jokester. He tended to play jokes on kids. Our cousins would come and stay, and he always took them snipe hunting first thing, which snipes didn't exist. You just took a bag out into a field, and he left them standing there for a while. Some of the jokes were a bit could edge toward cruel for children. He was also very, very strict. I remember the razor strap and that being used as a form of punishment. Yeah. But he loved farming. He loved the land. He loved growing things and had an appreciation for nature. And I would say that was one of his greatest gifts.
Right. So, what was the farming? What kind of farming was there in those years in the area?
Well, it was very much a family farm. He farmed when I was very young with horses, pulling plow and that kind of thing. One of their major crops, I mean, he grew corn, he kept cows and chickens and pigs, and we had sheep at one time, and just a variety of farm animals and different crops. But one of their major ones was growing cane, sorghum cane for molasses. And every fall we made molasses. I think I sent you a picture of the two of them.
Yes, I remember.
But that was kind of unique. We had people from all over, even from Illinois coming over and bringing their cane, which we would process, and then we sold all molasses that we made, and then took half for people who brought their cane for processing. They would get half and we would get half, and then resell the half we kept.
So what was, you would say, so special about this specific family for you to join them?
That is a wonderful question. I remember doing a visualization one time in which I was asking that question. And what I visualized was a circle of wise people advising me, you know, you have lessons to learn here. You need to join this family. And I think it was for the attachment to land, the respect for education, although my dad didn't have that. He didn't believe in higher education. He thought people who got higher education were too uppity and not wise about basic life.
Yeah. Okay. So, what significant story can you remember about the way you were gestated or born? Is there any story that you could share about your gestation period and your birth?
Okay. Well, I was a home birth, as were all of my siblings except the youngest one. As I mentioned, came along quite a bit later. But we were all home births. My dad loved babies. And but I never knew about where babies came from. That was not discussed. And you would think on a farm with the animals around, there would be some, but they were very good at keeping that secret. It was a major secret you didn't talk about. I had 3 younger brothers. I never knew my mother was pregnant.
Really?
Really. I asked my older sister about that one time because I thought, well, maybe it was just me. But she said, no, she didn't remember either. It was, you know, such a subject that was not discussed.
Right.
The cows found calves in the woods. I always wondered how come I didn't find them if they were out there waiting in the woods, you know. And I did a lot of walking around in the woods.
All right. Good. And what was it like to live with 5 more siblings, younger and older, different
Yeah.
ages, different
We,
traits? What was it like?
we had a lot of freedom being out in the country like that. You know, we could go out and walk on our own. We all worked together, especially during the fall when we did the molasses. We all stripped cane, which means taking the blades off the stalks and getting them ready to cut. So we all worked together. We worked together in the garden with my 3 younger brothers, and they were fairly close to each other. The oldest is 3.5 younger than I am, and then they were just 1.5 years apart on 3. But I used to play school with them. They had to be my students.
Is there any special story you would like to share, either with your younger siblings or the ones that followed?
Well, probably the most significant story is a sad one. My middle younger brother developed lymphoma and died at age 11. And at that point, my older sister was a nursing student and was allowed to come home and help care for him. I had graduated high school very young, barely 16, and was working in the city and came home and stayed during that period too. It was very difficult for all of us.
Mm. Can you guess why this, you say, difficult, challenging experience weaved or wove beautifully with your life purpose or life experience?
Very, I wanted to be a writer. That was at a fairly young age. And I did enroll in a writing class at Washington University in St. Louis while I was working there, and wrote a story about his death. Just a couple years ago, I wrote a poem about it.
Mm.
And it has had a significant impact.
Mm.
I think just part of knowing the fragility of life, also knowing what a wonderful community we had, the way the neighbors and of course all the relatives came together to help my parents deal with that.
Mm. So you actually close to nature
Mhm.
in a spirit of kindness and community, um, free spirit.
But it was kind of paradoxical, very free in the way of being able to explore our immediate territory, not very free when it came to experimenting with different lifestyles.
Mm. Yeah, very interesting, really.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, what were the initial traits that you remember you expressed, which took you to where you decided more consciously to go later on?
Well, I think what formed most of the first half of my life, let's say, was more a desire to fulfill what was expected in the way of traditions.
Mm.
So I married very young, had my two
Age
children young, age 16 at the time I got
16.
married.
Mm.
Had my first child at 17. And so I'd say those first years were an effort to live out what was expected of me, which is sort of the message, you made your bed, now lie on it kind of thing, so that no matter how bad things might get, uh, it was my job to make the marriage work.
Mhm.
And I managed that for almost 14 years and it was an abusive marriage.
So, what kind of husband was this first young
Yeah,
husband?
very young. He was only 17 and we were pregnant. Um, he went into the service of the advice of his father. So I spent most of the first few years, both my children, I had no attendant, no one with me. My parents took me to the hospital and then I didn't see them for 2 days because I had a very long labor for the first one. And for the second one, my husband was in Germany in the service and I had only phone contact. So by the time we really established a home together, we had two children. And he was young and not very honest with me about things. And I was very naive. So I simply accepted what came
Mm.
until, well, I don't know how deeply I want to go into this, but he actually came after me with a gun one time. And that was near the end of marriage. And I had to get my children out of that too. Surprising, they have grown into wonderful adults and many accomplishments. So I'm, in spite of that very rough beginning, they've done quite well. I think that's why I included pictures of them for you.
Mm. So, how many children have you got all in all? Two,
Uh,
only
my biological children too, just the
two.
two.
The
Uh,
two.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. My daughter, she's the one that was born when I was 17, and she's a potter now,
yeah,
does clay work, and she's just retired. I mean, just this
yeah.
last year. And so she can focus more on her personal work. She coordinated a play program for a local art center for over 30 years.
Good.
And my son was a musician and a writer, and currently is still writing. He's just completed a novel and is looking for an agent.
Yeah, but you also write, huh?
Yeah,
So perhaps it goes in the family as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think
So,
that desire to write.
so you got married very early, and I guess that you did not finish full-time educational curriculum since you were pregnant, age 16, and had your first baby 17. What happened in terms of
Well,
your,
I did graduate high school before that.
you mean college,
I
high
no,
school?
high school. I finished high school um, 3 months after my 16th birthday. And I met
Yes.
the first husband after that. It was actually a rebound relationship because I was engaged at age 14 to someone else.
Yeah, okay. So you had graduated high school. Did
Mhm.
you later on, maybe, did you continue with exploring knowledge or what?
Well, I always was an avid reader. Just read everything I could get my hands on. When my children were small, I took them to the library regularly. And then once they were grown and had started their own families, I went back to school at age 46, got my bachelor's degree, and then a master's degree, and then a PhD in pre and perinatal psychology.
Right. So until then, there is a gap. There is
Mhm.
some time in the between. What was it that fueled your heart?
I'm sorry, I don't.
That made your heart move forward. You were already a mother and
Mhm.
you had a family.
Mhm.
Uh, but what was it, if there was something that oriented you towards prenatal
Oh,
sciences?
okay. Now I understand. I started the bachelor's degree. Um, I was teaching yoga at the time. My husband and I had my second husband and I started an electrical contracting business, and I was the estimator for that. So I had a lot of business experience and a lot of health and wellness. So my bachelor's degree was a dual major, business and health and wellness, and completed that in 2 years because I could document a lot of prior learning for it. Um, in the process of that, I was, as I said, teaching yoga classes, and I had daughter, my daughter-in-law, and a stepdaughter-in-law, all pregnant at the same time, and all in my yoga class. So I decided that I needed to learn more about prenatal yoga because I hadn't really specialized in that, uh, and started searching literature and decided to design a self-study course as part of my degree in preparation for childbirth.
Mm.
And in the process of researching the preparation for childbirth course, first found Thomas Fernie's book, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child.
Mm.
Probably read it in a couple of days and bought 10 more copies and gave them to everybody I knew. especially my pregnant children, uh, and contacted Dr. Verney through his publisher. He said, "Oh, you've got to come to our Congress.
Mm.
This was 1989, and Amherst, Massachusetts." And so I did. And Dr. Verney sat with me and helped me because I was trying to write a paper for that class and needed some advice from him on my advisor for the class wanted me to do actual research and write a paper with my final. And so Dr. Verney helped me choose the topic of children's birth memories.
Mm.
And I did the research, and that's been published as Children Remembering Birth, both in the Pre and Perinatal Journal and Michael Adzema's paper at the time. I can't remember the name. But so that was really the start. I found Dr. Chamberlain's book not long after Verney's, so also consider both of them mentors. In fact, they were actual mentors on some of my PhD courses. But so I feel very fortunate to have known them at that point and had them as advisors.
So actually, the intention to be a good, kind presence, welcoming the new life entering the family, pushed you into entering this field, and you started by personal curiosity, and then you started developing something higher or beyond just ordinary curiosity, and you were inspired by the books and the people that then became also your mentors.
Yes, very much so. And I was also gifted in that both my daughter and daughter-in-law invited me to be at the birth of my first grandchildren.
Mm.
And those first grandchildren are now 38 years old. And then there one younger one, so all three of my biological grandchildren, I was privileged to see come into this life.
Mm. What do you remember of these first inspirators?
Other than Dr. Verney and Dr. Chamberlain, of course,
Yeah.
I guess William Emerson would be next. I actually completed his level 1 training back in the 90s. And Barbara Van Dyson, I knew from the beginning, but came very close to her later on. And I wish that she could be around for this interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So what kind of persons were they? Because we are talking about some decades back when all this was a new territory for the majority of people. And what kind of people, of humans were they? Chamberlain and Verney and Finchane and Emerson. What did you get from them?
Well, let's see. From Dr. Verney, I think the extra dedication to being academically and scientifically grounded.
Good.
And from Dr. Chamberlain, I think the friendliness and ease with other people. And he was so encouraging. When I wrote my book, The Birth of Hope, he did a blurb for the black back jacket, which is very kind and beautifully done. And I worked with both of them on the journal when I later got into that. So that encouragement, and Barbara was just, she was so whole and so accepting. You could sit and talk to her for hours and just, I was privileged to re-edit her womb, her book in later years, and that's when we became really close. And she just was an exceptional therapist. Her creation of the STAR program, I think, contributed tremendously to this field.
Yes, it did.
Womb Prints, that's the name of her book, Womb Prints.
Yes, right. So you started at some point to move from being a student and the person inspired by, you changed position and you started to become a contributor one way or the other. Would you like to talk about this change?
Yes, I came in, still as a student, very enthusiastic, but I'm still a student. I mean, we continue to learn, and I'm always curious, and I want to know the background of things. And so during the 90s, I would say I contributed by presenting at congresses. And I attended every conference from 1989 to 1923. I've chaired 5 of them. But I think that was the beginning. And then when Dr. Verney decided to retire as editor-in-chief of the journal, B.J. Lyman became editor, and I became associate editor in 2002, and worked with B.J. for about 6 years as associate editor. In that capacity, we could kind of split up the work where she did 3 issues of the year and I did one of them, completely putting it together. Then talking to BJ one day, well, let's see. I withdrew from that. Don't remember what year. And I know. I had gone into working for a foster placement agency, doing therapy with foster children. And then took on the management of the agency and was just too busy. So I told BJ I couldn't continue. And she got another associate, but I kept in touch with her. BJ and I became very good friends. Talking to her one day, she said the new associate editor just wasn't working out because she wasn't contributing anything, and would I be interested in coming back? Well, by then things had shifted, and the agency went out of business. Long story there. So I said, well, yeah, sure, I'll consider coming back. She said, well, tell you what, why don't you be editor now and I'll be associate editor and work with you for a year or two, and that way. And that's the way we did it. And I was editor from that time until 2019, except for a couple of years when Kate White was editor. But then I came back when Thomas called and said Kate was leaving and would I consider coming back.
Right.
So I was the editor of the journal for 15 years or so.
15. Total. And when did you start writing?
Writing other than the journal?
Other than the journal, yes.
Because I had contributed articles to the journal before I became more actively involved, and had done some writing over the years, because that interest never had really gone away. But I started writing The Birth of Hope in 2008, and it's based on my experience in the foster care system as a therapist and based on pre and perinatal psychology. The final chapter is the story of Hope's gestation. Hope was the baby to a teenage mom. So I've got personal experience in there too. But the last chapter, as they started to say, was written from the baby's point of view in the womb. So that was, my contribution at that point. When I resigned from most of my duties with APA, which included by that time being executive director, still editor of the journal, still doing multiple jobs, many hours a day for a long time. But I wanted to get back to my own writing. I really did feel, getting to the point I don't have that many years left, got to do this. So that happened 2019. I did come back 2023 to co-chair the Congress. But other than that, haven't been actively involved in all those different roles with APA. I was at one point vice president, treasurer, just a lot of different roles with the organization. I thought it was so important. And there were a lot of turbulent years. As you know, growing an association is quite an undertaking. But since that time, I've written 2 travel books with my husband and these 2 family memoirs. And just getting ready to start on a new project when I developed an issue with my right hand and had to have surgery and was in a cast. So I haven't been able to write or type for about 6 months. It's healing now and getting close.
So, Jeane, how would you speak about your personal contribution to the development of the field, apart from being the bones and the structure that makes it possible?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think my primary contribution has been in the contributing the business acumen to, do the role of executive editor and the academic contributions of writing journal articles and getting the word out through my writing. I chose to write a novel to get the word out because I thought it might appeal to a broader audience than simply an academic writing about pre and perinatal psychology. But my marketing skills are very weak, so it didn't go a long ways. But I think it's that academic piece that is important. I did teach at Santa Barbara Graduate School and for the Chicago School after they bought out Santa Barbara. I designed a course, master's level and PhD for the Chicago School, which they never implemented, but did do that. I designed another course because at a point when Apple was having a lot of turmoil, and I think ISPPM was also, I got real curious about what happens to organizations, what causes them to break up. I had realized that APA came along pretty much 100 years after Freud, and Freud had his Psychoanalytic Society in Vienna. And I thought, I'm going to do some, design a course, research course to find out what happened to the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society. What factors come in that destroy organizations that have such fundamental value? And did manage that, traveled to Vienna to do part of the research for putting that together and find a price. Unfortunately, when it was put in the catalog, only 4 people signed up because it was a rather expensive course because it included travel. The design was such that I would ask each student to choose one member of the Psychoanalytic Society to study in depth and report on. And then we would meet in Vienna and actually have a meeting with everyone playing the role of their chosen participant. I think it would have been a wonderful experience. It could have been disastrous too, so we never know. But it was one of my, I think, favorite projects that I've done in recent years. Just putting that together. And just that, as journal editor, as reading all these wonderful contributors' work and being able to travel some and spread the word. I presented my own research. My PhD research was titled Aware Beginnings, Body Language and Birth Memory, and involved a research project with children ages 5 to 7. And I chose to do body language because one of my advisors, when I did the children's interviews, and those were ages 3 to 5, said, well, people don't believe children that age anyway. What do you want to waste your time talking? And I thought, well, body language is different. You can, there's scientific basis for, yes, you can see echoes of birth in the way children move. And I used my experience with yoga and used yoga postures to videotape the children. I didn't tell them they were yoga postures. I just said, I want you to do these things. And I had photographed an articulated figure so that the children wouldn't be influenced by my body language, but would, just do these positions, forward bending, a back bend. I had those 5 movements of the spine covered in the postures I chose. Videotape the children from front on and to both sides. So I had them repeat all of the postures 5 times. And I was so grateful for William Emerson's training in videotaping because these children whipped through these postures so quickly, I couldn't have gotten a lot out of it if it hadn't been for slow motion video. Slow it down, look at it. What do you find? And had 2 other people review the videos and make notes as well. So I had more input than just my own. And finally wound up making a list, correlations between something I saw in the posture and something that the children did. And after the videotaping, then gathered their birth stories. So that in watching them, I wouldn't be influenced by what I knew about their birth. The most significant finding from that, I think, was that I observed stiffness in the hips in the boys who were in the study who had been circumcised. There were 9 boys, and 5 of them had been, and 4 had not. So I could compare them not only to the girls, but to the boys that had not been, were much more rigid through the hips. And that was confirmed by one body worker who reviewed the videos. And she said she had noticed that in her massage, that men who'd been circumcised are much more rigid through the hips. And so a possible treatment would follow. Let's titrate that and have them do the postures that trigger that stiffness and just play the edges of it until they can loosen it up a bit. And maybe that would also have some psychological effects of loosening up around those boundaries.
Have you published anything on that?
Yes, that was also published. I presented it, that research and the Children Remembering Birth together at an ISPPM conference in the Netherlands and at a transpersonal psychology conference in Prague.
Yeah, so good. Have you ever met and worked with Farah or Farand These,
He was around in my early years with Apple, but no, I never worked with them.
okay, yeah, because he also
Yeah,
observed the supposedly
yeah.
the movement related to that. So, since you have all of this observation and reflection on the early experiences that shape our postnatal, even adulthood, how did all this understanding matured you later or now?
Or now, that's it's ongoing. Um,
Yeah.
I would say my training with William and the experiential work I did with him helped tremendously in overcoming some of my um, difficulty. I've always felt like I had to do things myself, that I couldn't depend on other people. I mean, getting married so young and taking care of a family, but previous to that, being a full worker on the farm, I started babysitting other people's children at age 11. Um, so I'd always, felt very isolated.
Mm.
So the work with William helped. I also was very privileged to have a hypnosis session with David Chamberlain when he was working with me on my PhD course.
Mm.
And along with a lot of other therapy, but those were two significant contributions to personal growth. Yes.
Good. Beautiful. And with all of this understanding now accumulating or still being accumulated over time, what is it that you would like to communicate to young professionals entering the field now?
Oh, I think the vital core is the importance of the first 9 months of life. That it's a part of life that had not been addressed much before Otto wrote his book. And even then, it was very known to only a very small circle of people and not accepted. It amazes me that with the work of ISPPM and then APA, we're still battling. I designed a course for the community college I was teaching in at the time, in an introduction to pre and perinatal psychology. My department head was receptive, but said, we can't really pay you to do this right now. It's very experimental. So I taught it for one semester with no pay, which was fine. They provided me a classroom and students, and the students were very receptive, but they were a little concerned about the credit transferring to four-year schools. So I thought, well, at the time I was very early in the field and so enthusiastic, and I just thought everybody would see this. So I wrote letters to four universities in the area and was shocked at the strength of the objections. That I am just, one writer said, I am shocked that this is even being thought about being taught in our community colleges. And that was my first experience with the real backlash against this knowledge. And I thought at the time, part of the resistance is fear on the people who don't know about their birth or their gestation, but probably have a deep sense that they carry wounds from that, don't want to face it. And so I think that's a big part of the resistance. And I would prepare people coming into the field for that. That you have to expect some backlash here. They don't want to know how difficult that was, how near death in many cases that experience is.
Right. And what would you like to communicate to teachers and educators that see that children very young, unfortunately, sometimes months old,
Mhm.
and perhaps they have a lot of opportunities if they know something at least.
Yeah, just again, that importance of the first 9 months and be on the lookout. There are certain symptoms, an overreactivity to uh, oh, children who are triggered to anger or fear in certain situations. Look for, or at least hold in your heart. I always that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was 5 months pregnant when she, felt movement, and she kept these things and pondered them in her heart. That phrase has always been significant because, yes, if we can just keep the truth, keep what we observe, it will be beneficial. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to express everything in words, but keep the truth that that child has some deep wound that's being expressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's for very young children. I would say I did try to introduce these concepts in high schools. Uh, Tried to get the journal in more college libraries, and I think in the high schools would be very important. That's when you start verbalizing the information. You start, sharing the research and uh, letting young people know
Yeah,
how important their bodies are. And
right.
anyway,
And what about what would you like to 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 say to the parents, no matter what age their children are, but what would you like to let them know?
with parents, as one of my classes, I worked with uh, parents preparing for childbirth, and just letting them know that the baby is listening, is active, and will be impacted by what goes on. I remember one couple in particular who, about 6 or 7 months into the pregnancy, the mother's mother died of an aneurysm.
Mm.
And of course, she was extremely upset. And the husband kept trying to comfort her. And I said, she needs to process this and she needs to process it now. But you need to let the baby know that it's nothing that they did. I said, baby may not understand the words, but the baby understands feeling. And baby knows mom's upset, whether she's crying or not. Baby knows mom's upset, and you need to reassure the baby that everything's going to be okay and that mom needs to be sad now.
Mm. Right. And if you were in power to to change policies, what would you choose to do, or
Oh
what would
boy.
you decide to do?
Well, first of all, we need to uh, get clear about abortion, understand that in some cases, that's the best choice for mother and baby. Although I had the experience in working with a small group of women one time who were sharing some of this information, and the topic came up. And I said, well, often, if you simply communicate with the baby will understand and leave. There'll be a spontaneous abortion and not something you have to force on anyone. And 5 of the 8 women in that group had had that experience. And I wonder how many others there are. And that's something I want to get out. And that's something young people should know too. That, yes, the baby, you need to be aware of the importance of this pregnancy and this new life that you're dealing with, and work with that life if indeed it's not the time to be born.
So you would be clear with this.
But I would get it out of the legal system. We don't need politicians making such an enormous life decision for women, for families.
So
that would be one step. Another would be more leave time when babies come. They need their parents in those early months. And I would really work on family leave time.
Excellent. Jeane, since you have been present, witnessing the development of the field, let's say from the 60s, 70s, 80s, etc., although it started much earlier before you were even conceived in the 20s. What do you see are the trends today?
The
trends. What is the direction that it goes today, the trends?
Okay. So, I think we continue to make the efforts to bring more people in. I'm very excited about the young people who are coming into APA and becoming active. But it's getting this out. There seemed to have been a curve where during the 80s and 90s, there was, when people learned about it, they were enthusiastic, especially parents, not so much the academics, but the parents. And now there seems to have been a moving away, a more conservative approach that isn't as accepting. So I really am looking forward to the time when that changes again. And the young people coming in are the ones who can do that. And so we need younger leadership in our organizations, their enthusiasm and curiosity to really get the word out so that parents know that it's not the day of birth that you become a parent. It's conception or even preconception. When you're thinking about a child, you're already becoming a parent.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, is there anything that you would like to bring to our conversation in terms of let's be careful with this, or let's turn our attention to that?
Let's be careful of confrontation. In other words, you find someone who's really opposed to this knowledge or on the abortion issue is just, feels that destroying life is just wrong no matter what the circumstances, and approach it with finding common ground. Yes, we both value life, but we also recognize that children who are born unwanted face tremendous obstacles.
Mm.
And so you have to broaden your view. I wouldn't say have to. I just said don't be confrontational. But encourage them to develop a broader perspective.
Mm.
And so that would be the caution. And my dream is that, people become more open to this. Barbara Finn Dyson appeared on the Oprah show back in the 70s. Why aren't we doing that now? I think popular media is a good way to get the word out.
Mm.
And I think developing a more united front. The conflicts that arise because even within pre and perinatal psychology, we have many different approaches, many different value systems. But if we can stick to that core of the importance of those first 9 months and how babies come into the world, and that entry of one of the videos I watched was the gal who wrote Active Birth, and I loved her. I hadn't known about her work before. But she had that energy that says, yes, the way babies come in is so important. It sets patterns for the rest of life. And I think research like psychohistorian, I can't remember his name, perhaps.
Lloyd DeMoss.
I'm sorry?
Lloyd DeMoss.
DeMoss, yes. I think his work is so important on a cultural, societal level. If we wonder about some of the leaders in the world today and how they became who they are, perhaps investigating their birth history would be interesting.
Right.
And give us insights and common ground. It's a way to common ground.
Mm-hmm.
To really become more aware of the influence of gestation and birth on not only the individual, but the wider society.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing all this wisdom with us, Jeane.
It's been a pleasure, Olga. So good to work with you.